Wicked and the Wonderful World of Oz, the magical stories that have given us magic for over a century. What about it? From the timeless 1939 classic to the many unoriginal and very original interpretations of Dorothy's classic story, and from the daring adaptations of some of the later books to the many modern projects that try to give now familiar stories a fresh new angle. Let's get into it! Please help your favorite average movie guy get to 1,000 subscribers by subscribing right now. The Fairylogue and Radio-Plays, 1908. The history of Oz probably starts way earlier than you would have expected, with this mixture of live actors, hand-tinted magic lantern slides, and film. Frank Baum, the author of the original book, himself would appear as if he were giving a lecture while he interacted with the characters. It was based on Baum's first 3 books, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, The Marvelous Land of Oz, and Ozma of Oz. Although today seen mostly as a failed first effort to adapt the books, the Fairylogue and Radio-Plays is notable in film history because it contains the earliest original film score to be documented. The film itself is now lost, but the script for Baum's narration and production still survives. The Selig silent short films, 1910. Only 2 years later we already got the next Oz project, a slew of silent films produced without Baum's direct input. They weren't lavish and they didn't have sound, but they captured something entirely new, the idea that film could make fantasy real. The first short, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, distilled Baum's entire first novel into barely a reel's worth of running time. Dorothy's house is lifted by a storm, she meets the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman and the Cowardly Lion, defeats a wicked witch, and then returns to Kansas, all in about 13 minutes. The later entries, Dorothy and the Scarecrow in Oz, and the Land of Oz are now lost. But they hint at a curious ambition. Even in the earliest years of cinema, studios already saw Oz as a series. The Baum silent films, 1914. 4 years later, Baum was no longer content to let others interpret his world. He wanted to control it, to bring Oz to life exactly as he imagined it, producing 3 more silent films. The Patchwork Girl of Oz adapts Baum's 7th book, telling the story of Ojo, a boy who journeys through Oz to find ingredients to cure his petrified family. The Magic Cloak of Oz was based on a non-canonical work, concentrated on a fairy-made cloak that grants wishes, weaving several kingdoms and moral lessons together. His Majesty, the Scarecrow of Oz, was eventually turned into the 9th book, blending multiple storylines, including Dorothy's adventures and the villainous King Cruel. Yet, despite Baum's enthusiasm, the films flopped. Critics found them too peculiar, and audiences didn't quite know what to make of Oz without the words to guide them. The Wizard of Oz, 1925. Almost a decade later, we are still not at the well-known classic. This version is a silent slapstick adaptation of the first book that barely resembles the story. The film transforms the tale into a kind of surreal dream comedy, where Kansas, farmhands, and villains reappear in Oz as exaggerated versions of themselves. The result is visually inventive but tonally odd, part fairy tale, part vaudeville chaos. Still, the film stands out as a curious artifact, a reminder of how early Hollywood often treated fantasy as spectacle first and story second. The Wizard of Oz, 1939. After the first animated adaptation as a short film in 1933, we finally get to the adaptation that brought Oz to iconic status. Directed by Victor Fleming and unofficially several others, it transformed Baum's children's tale into one of the defining myths of American cinema. The story, by now etched into cultural memory, again based on the first book, follows Dorothy Gale, played by the legendary Judy Garland, a Kansas farm girl whisked away by a tornado to the Technicolor world of Oz. Along her journey to the Emerald City, she meets the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, each searching for something they already possess. Together, they confront the Wicked Witch of the West and ultimately discover that home, in all its imperfections, was enough all along. What makes the film extraordinary isn't just its music or its spectacle, it's the emotional clarity. Judy Garland's performance gives Dorothy a fragile humanity that grounds the fantasy. Over the Rainbow isn't just a song, it's an ache for something better, something beyond the grey dust of the real world. Technicolor was still new then, and the filmmakers used it like a revelation. The transition from Kansas to the vivid use of Oz remains one of cinema's most magical moments. Despite the infamous production, it went on to win 2 Academy Awards, Best Original Score and Best Original Song. Over time, The Wizard of Oz has transcended its origins to become a cultural touchstone. It's been reinterpreted endlessly, but its power endures. Beneath the glitter and songs lies a simple universal message that sometimes the journey away from home is what teaches us to value it most.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Shirley Temple's storybook, The Land of Oz, 1960. 2 decades later, the biggest pause between two projects, we got our next journey to Oz, the first after its copyright expired. This project was part of Shirley Temple's beloved anthology series. It adapted Baum's second book, and Shirley Temple herself appeared as Ozma. In the story, Lord General Nickadick wants to take over Oz, so he goes to Mombi and asks her to transform the beloved Princess Ozma into a marble statue. Mombi instead changes her into a boy named Tip. Some characters were removed from the book, but we still got to see many new faces on the screen for the very first time.
What a horrible nightmare.
The Wizard of Mars, 1965. After Tales of the Wizard of Oz, the animated shorts not based directly on any of the books, but original stories derived from the world of Oz, as well as Return to Oz, an unofficial animated sequel remake of the 1939 film. 5 years later, we got to one of the strangest reinterpretations of the Oz story, a low-budget, existential sci-fi retelling disguised as a space adventure. The film follows 4 astronauts on a mission to Mars, whose ship crashes on the planet's desolate surface. Stranded and searching for survival, they encounter mysterious ruins, a golden road, and eventually a cryptic being known as the Wizard. On paper, it's a science fiction film, but the parallels to the Wizard of Oz are deliberate. The travelers mirror Dorothy and her companions, the yellow brick road becomes a golden Martian pathway, and the wizard himself turns out to be another illusion. The Wizard of Mars is oddly hypnotic. It takes Oz out of fantasy and into the void of space. While it never reached mainstream recognition, it stands as a curious relic of 1960s independent sci-fi.
Will it work?
Sure it'll work.
The Wonderful Land of Oz, 1969. After Fantasia 3, the Spanish fantasy film in which Oz was used as one of the 3 fairy tales, as well as Off to See the Wizard, the anthology series which featured animated intros with the characters of Oz, introducing family-friendly MGM movies. 4 years later, we got to one of those adaptations that feels like a dream someone had after reading Baum's books as a child, earnest, awkward, and oddly endearing. It was made on a shoestring budget, intended primarily for children's matinee screenings, yet it holds a strange place in Oz history as the first feature-length film to adapt the marvelous Land of Oz, Baum's second book, rather than retelling Dorothy's story. The film follows Tip and brings a wooden man named Jack Pumpkinhead to life, joined by the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, and meeting General Ginger along the way. Tip helps lead a rebellion in the Emerald City, only to discover that he is actually Princess Ozma, the rightful ruler of Oz, transformed into a boy by Mombi's magic. Visually, the film is bare bones, but there's something undeniably charming about it. It stays surprisingly close to Baum's original story, more so than many higher-budget adaptations. In a way, The Wonderful Land of Oz represents the enduring power of Baum's imagination, that even without Hollywood glamour or special effects, people kept returning to Oz to tell its stories.
Let's hurry.
Wait, I need a little sleep first.
Journey Back to Oz, 1972. After Ayasik ve Sihirli, Küçükler Rüyalar Ülkesinde, the so-called Turkish Wizard of Oz, a loose adaptation of the first book, 3 years later we got an animated sequel to the 1939 original and very loose adaptation of the second book. What makes it special is its voice cast. Liza Minnelli plays Dorothy, stepping into the role made famous by her mother, Judy Garland. That connection alone gives the film a haunting, almost poetic resonance. The story follows Dorothy as she's once again swept back to Oz. She discovers that the evil witch Mombi is plotting to conquer the Emerald City with an army of green elephants. Teaming up with new friends like Pumpkinhead and the Wooden Head, Dorothy sets out to stop her and restore order to Oz. Visually, Journey Back to Oz captures the signature filmation style, flat animation, bold colors, and a kind of Saturday morning earnestness. What it represents is the enduring pull of Oz mythos, how each generation, even in animation, feels compelled to return, to reimagine, to follow that yellow brick road once more.
Oh, you started out confused. Look at you pointing 3 different ways at once.
20th Century Oz, 1976. 4 years later, we got another one of the most unusual and overlooked reinterpretations of the Oz myth, a gritty, low-budget Australian rock musical adaptation of the original story. It trades yellow brick roads for dusty highways and emerald cities for seedy bars and neon lights. In this version, Dorothy isn't a wide-eyed farm girl, but a runaway teenager groupie following a rock band. After a car crash, she's thrust into a surreal odyssey across a landscape populated by biker gangs, outcasts, and misfits, each echoing the familiar Oz archetypes in a modern, rough-edged form. The wizard himself becomes a rock star, an image of hollow celebrity, power without wisdom, reflecting the disillusionment of the post-hippie generation. 20th Century Oz never found mainstream success, but it stands as a fascinating cultural artifact, a reflection of how Baum's story could morph to fit the anxieties and aesthetics of a very different world.
And don't bloody well spill any, I'll have you.
The Wiz, 1978. 2 years later, we got another bold reinterpretation of the original story, a vibrant, soulful reimagining that transforms Baum's fairy tale into a celebration of black culture, music, and identity, adapted from the hit Broadway musical. The film stars Diana Ross as Dorothy, now a shy Harlem schoolteacher instead of a Kansas farm girl. After being swept away by a storm, she lands in a dazzling, surreal version of New York City where gravity comes alive, skyscrapers twist like yellow bricks, and the Emerald City pulses with disco lights in style. Along the way, she meets the Scarecrow, played by Michael Jackson, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, each searching for self-worth in a world that's forgotten them. Visually and musically, it's pure spectacle. Its massive sets, glittering costumes, and Quincy Jones-produced soundtrack fuse funk, gospel, and pop into something audaciously theatrical. Yet, despite its ambition, it struggled at the box office, grossing only $21 million, and was panned by many critics on release. It's messy, grand, and heartfelt, a film that wears its soul on its sleeve. Today, The Wiz proves that Oz didn't belong to one culture, one color, or one era. It could be reborn again and again, as long as someone, somewhere, still believed in following the road.
You believe them. If I only had a brain.
Os Trapalhões e o Mágico de Oróz, 1984. After Thanksgiving in the Land of Oz, a lesser-known animated TV special for Thanksgiving, The Marvelous Land of Oz, a filmed stage play adaptation of the second book, Ozu no Mahotsukai, a Japanese adaptation offering surprising new life for the original story. Sekai Maisaku Dawa Manga Shiritsu, another Japanese anime version of Oz, as well as Krani Zarnoxika Oza, a Polish series adapting the first 2 books. 6 years later, we get to the sharp and absurdist Brazilian parody, mixing slapstick comedy with biting social satire. The film reimagines Oz through the lens of Brazil's drought-ridden Northeast. The story follows a group of rural misfits who set off to find the Mágico de Oróz, a supposed wizard who can bring rain and save their land. Along the way, they encounter familiar eccentric characters and corrupt politicians, turning the familiar Oz journey into a surreal allegory about inequality, greed, and hope in Brazil's sertão. Rather than a simple parody, the film doubles as a political commentary. Released during Brazil's military dictatorship, it used humor and fantasy to critique government neglect and social injustice. It was a carnival of laughter, masking a cry for change.
Tatu, ele vai cair. Se cair do chão não passa.
Return to Oz, 1985. The next year, we got another unofficial sequel to the 1939 film, based on a combination of Baum's second and third book. This first Disney Oz project is one of the most haunting and misunderstood adaptations of Baum's world, a dark, dreamlike sequel that feels closer to the original books than the MGM classic ever did. It presents Oz not as a place of technicolor wonder, but as a shattered kingdom haunted by loss. The film picks up after Dorothy's first trip to Oz. Dorothy, played by a young Veruca Balk, who has been deemed delusional by her family and is about to undergo electroshock therapy. But she escapes and is transported back to Oz, only to find it in ruins. The Emerald City is destroyed, the citizens turned to stone, and the Gnome King rules in terror alongside Mombi. Along the way, she befriends new companions, her now talking chicken Belinda, TikTok the mechanical soldier, Jack Pumpkinhead, and the flying Gump. Visually, Return to Oz is eerie and unforgettable. It feels ripped straight from a child's nightmare. Audiences at the time weren't ready for its tone. It was too dark for children and too strange for adults, and it flopped at the box office, only grossing around $11 million worldwide. However, it did receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Visual Effects. Over time, Return to Oz gained a devoted cult following. Viewers came to appreciate its bravery, its willingness to treat childhood fear seriously, and to explore the fragility of imagination itself.
It's not finished. What berserk?
The Wonderful Galaxy of Oz, 1992 to 1993. After Ozu no Mahotsukai, a Japanese series that included the first adaptation of Baum's sixth book, The Emerald City of Oz, Dorothy meets Ozma of Oz, an adaptation of the third book introduced by Michael Gross from Family Ties, The Wizard of Oz, an animated TV series following Dorothy's return to Oz, as well as, again surprisingly named The Wizard of Oz, another animated short film. Almost a decade later, we get to another very original anime reimagining of Baum's original book, where Oz moves to the stars, again, but in a very different way. This series transforms Dorothy's story into a sci-fi adventure. The year is 2060, and Dorothy, Gale, and her dog Toto have just been swept away from their home planet of New Kansas to the Galaxy of Oz, where an evil witch known as Gloomhilda wants to reclaim the galaxy after being driven out by Dr. Oz. Under his guidance, Dorothy and some familiar heroes set out to obtain 3 magic crystals to save the galaxy. While widely different from Baum's original vision, it's an intriguing blend of fantasy and science fiction that adds to the plethora of weird and funky Oz projects.
Uncle Henry, there's something weird up here, like a tornado.
The Oz Kids, 1996 to 1997. After Sekai Masaku do Washiritsu, another Japanese anthology series based on classic fairy tales, 4 years later we get this animated series loosely based on many of the books. It introduced viewers to the next generation of Oz's inhabitants, the children of Dorothy and Zap, named Dot and Neddy, as well as the children of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, Jack Pumpkinhead, the Wizard, and Glinda. It was a fun idea, combining classic Oz elements with youthful, adventure storylines, making it accessible for young audiences and giving longtime Oz fans some new faces to cheer for.
Think of all the peace and quiet. Just kidding.
Oz, 1997 to 2003. The following year, HBO gave us an Oz adaptation that isn't a trip down the yellow brick road, but a brutal, unflinching descent into the Emerald City Correctional Facility, one of television's most violent and psychologically complex settings. It was HBO's first hour-long drama series, paving the way for the modern prestige TV era that would give us The Sopranos, The Wire, and Breaking Bad. Despite sharing its title with Baum's Fantasy Land, Oz is anything but whimsical. The show takes place in a maximum security prison nicknamed Oz, and follows inmates and staff caught in an endless cycle of power survival and moral decay. Each group inside the prison forms its own tribe, constantly at war, constantly negotiating fragile alliances. There are no heroes in Oz. Every character, from sadistic guards to the broken inmates, is both victim and perpetrator. In a strange, poetic way, the title fits perfectly. This Oz is a dark reflection of Baum's, an inversion of fantasy where no one escapes and no one is saved.
When are you going to learn, Prag? You belong to me.
Lion of Oz, 2000. After Mamo Zipkura Pautravia Movic, a Polish adaptation of the third book, as well as Adventures in the Emerald City, a Russian adaptation that was set to adapt all 14 books but was halted, we got to a monumental project, an animated prequel to the original story based on a book by Baum's great-grandson. The story begins before Dorothy ever arrives in Oz. The lion is a circus performer who's magically transported to Oz, where the Wicked Witch of the East manipulates him into retrieving the magical flower of Oz, promising him freedom in return. Along the way, he meets a group of companions who help him discover that real courage comes from compassion, not magic or medals, before eventually meeting Dorothy and stepping into the original story. While Lion of Oz didn't make a major cultural splash, it stands as one of the more thoughtful attempts to expand the Oz mythology. Instead of reimagining the original story for the bazillionth time, it enriches it, offering a tender prologue to a familiar journey.
You talk? But you're a tree! Whoa! I talked!
The Muppets Wizard of Oz, 2005. 5 years later, we got another monumental retelling of the original story, filtered through the chaotic charm of Jim Henson's beloved puppets. This version stars Ashanti as Dorothy, a Kansas girl who dreams of becoming a famous singer. After a tornado obviously carries her to Oz, she meets the familiar puppet versions of Baum's characters. Kermit as the Scarecrow, Gonzo as the Tin Thing, and Fozzie Bear as the Cowardly Lion. Their wizard, of course, is played by none other than Jeffrey Tambor, and Miss Piggy steals the show as all four witches, good and wicked alike. The film mixes puppet slapstick with tongue-in-cheek parody, poking fun at both the 1939 film and contemporary celebrity culture. Instead of a simple moral fable, Dorothy's journey becomes a commentary on fame, ambition, and authenticity, updated for a media-obsessed age.
I'm talking explosions everywhere!
Tin Man, 2007. After Apocalypse Oz, a well-liked short film hybrid of The Wizard of Oz and Apocalypse Now. 2 years later, we got another one of the more ambitious and unconventional reimaginings of The Wizard of Oz, a dark sci-fi fantasy miniseries. In this version, Dorothy becomes DG, played by Zooey Deschanel, who's drawn into the OZ, the Outer Zone, a parallel world ruled by the tyrannical sorceress Askedelia. The story loosely follows the structure of the Oz myth. DG teams up with Glitch, a man missing parts of his brain, Wyatt Kane, a hardened lawman encased in metal armor, and Raw, an empathetic creature representing the Cowardly Lion. Together, they set out to restore balance in the OZ and uncover DG's forgotten past. Visually, Tin Man treats the whimsy of Oz for grit and surrealism. It's less a fairy tale and more of a postmodern fantasy adventure. While critics were divided on its tone and dialogue, Tin Man found a strong cult following for its boldness. It captures something timeless about Oz, its ability to evolve. Each generation remakes a story in its own image, and this one, gritty, futuristic, and introspective, belongs squarely to the age of reboots and rediscoveries.
Okay, on the count of 3. 1.
Tom and Jerry and the Wizard of Oz, 2011. 4 years later, we got this surprisingly faithful and charming crossover that merges the classic story with one of animation's oldest rivalry. The film obviously retells the Wizard of Oz almost beat for beat, but with Tom and Jerry along for the ride, creating chaos and comedy in the margins of the familiar story. Rather than parodying the original, Tom and Jerry and the Wizard of Oz treats it with surprising respect. While it doesn't reinvent Oz, it celebrates it, showing that even 70 years later there's still room for a little slapstick on the yellow brick road.
Look, Emerald City is closer and prettier than ever.
After The Wizard, 2011. That same year, we got this small, independent sequel to The Wizard of Oz that takes the story in a surprisingly emotional and grounded direction. It imagines what happens after Dorothy's adventures, both to her and to the people and creatures she left behind in Oz. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman must travel to Kansas to find Dorothy. While After the Wizard didn't reach a wide audience, it stands out for its earnestness and originality for the world of Oz after decades. It's not trying to be a spectacle or a reboot.
Won't you sit with us?
Dorothy and the Witches of Oz, 2012. The next year, this film takes the timeless tale into the modern world, blending fantasy and urban adventure in an ambitious continuation of the Oz mythos. The film is based on the first, second, fifth, and sixth books, actually making it the first film to adapt some of the fifth book. The film and miniseries follows an adult Dorothy Gale, now a successful children's author in New York City, who has long forgotten that her famous stories were based on real memories. Her comfortable life begins to unravel when the Wicked Witch of the West appears and is planning to conquer Earth. As Dorothy rediscovers her past and reunites with her old friends in new forms, she must confront the truth about who she is and accept that her imagination was never fiction. The film's tone is part fantasy epic, part low-budget charm, mixing practical effects, colorful costumes, and earnest performances into a story that wears its love for the source material proudly.
It was all real.
Oz, the Great and Powerful, 2013. The next year, we got the biggest Oz project since the classic from 1939. It was Disney's lavish attempt to return to the land of Oz, this time not through Dorothy's eyes, but through the man behind the curtain. Directed by Sam Raimi, the film serves as a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, imagining how a carnival magician from Kansas became the legendary and fraudulent wizard. James Franco stars as Oscar Diggs, a small-time circus con artist who dreams of greatness but lacks integrity. After being swept away by a tornado in true Oz fashion, he crash lands in a vibrant, CG-saturated land of Oz. The people there believe he's the fulfillment of a prophecy, a great wizard who will defeat the Wicked Witch and restore peace to the land. Seizing the opportunity, Oscar pretends to be their savior, but soon learns that his lies have real consequences. Along his journey, he encounters three witches who define his fate. Theodora, played by Mila Kunis, whose innocence curdles into bitterness and transforms her into the Wicked Witch of the West. Evanora, played by Rachel Weisz, the manipulative power behind Emerald City, and Glinda, played by Michelle Williams, the kind-hearted witch who believes in Oscar's potential for good. The film bursts with old Hollywood energy, a black and white prologue that blooms into dazzling color, sweeping camera movements, and a tone that shifts from playful to menacing. While critics were divided on its uneven tone and heavy CGI, the film succeeded commercially, grossing $493 million worldwide and reintroducing Oz to a new generation. In the end, Oz, the Great and Powerful is about the power of belief, not in magic, but in ourselves. It reminds us that even the greatest wizard might just be a man from Kansas, learning that the real trick isn't pretending to be great, it's choosing to be good.
Wicked Witch is the triangle.
Supernatural, 2013. That same year, we got what might not be an Oz adaptation in the traditional sense, but it does venture into the world in one of its most unexpected and memorable episodes. The show's Oz episode, named Slumber Party, reimagines Dorothy Gale and the Wicked Witch within Supernatural's mythic universe, revealing that Baum's books were based on real supernatural events recorded by the secretive man of letters. When the brothers accidentally free both Dorothy and the witch inside their bunker, they must battle magic instead of monsters. Supernatural chose Oz because it fits perfectly with the show's tone, blending American folklore, fantasy, and pop culture into something darker and more human.
I have tried cutting off her head, burning her, dousing her with holy water.
Once Upon a Time, 2013 to 2018. Interestingly, that same year, another big TV show ventured into the world of Oz during its third season, reimagining its characters through a darker, more serialized lens. Here, Oz isn't a standalone land of whimsy, but one of the many realms connected by magic. The series introduces Zelena, the Wicked Witch of the West, as one of its most complex villains, a jealous half-sister to Regina, the evil queen. Dorothy also appeared, though briefly, and the familiar trappings of Oz, the Emerald City, flying monkeys, and magic portals are all given the show's signature twist of mystery. mystery and melodrama. Once Upon a Time used Oz not as a simple homage, but as an extension of its central theme, that every story, no matter how magical, is really about identity, forgiveness, and the fight to choose your own destiny.
What's evil, dear? Wicked.
Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return, 2014. The next year, we finally return to the more normal world of Oz we were used to, with this animated sequel that picks up right where the classic story left off. A magical rainbow pulls Dorothy back to Oz, where a new villain, the Jester, has seized control. Dorothy reunites with the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion, though they play a smaller role this time as she travels through new lands with fresh companions. Wiser the Owl, Marshall Mallow, and the China Princess. Together, they embark on another journey to save Oz and restore balance to the kingdom. The film's tone aims for the charm of the 1939 classic, but often feels caught between modern children's entertainment and nostalgia-driven homage. In the larger history of Oz adaptations, Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return stands as a well-intentioned but uneven echo of a greater legacy.
All of Oz at risk. I need you two to stand guard while I try to contact Dorothy.
OzLand, 2014. That same year, we got an independent post-apocalyptic reimagining of The Wizard of Oz that strips the story down to its core themes of hope and perseverance. The film follows two survivors, Lind and Ryder, in a post-apocalyptic Kansas, finding a copy of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which makes them treat the novel as if it were historical non-fiction. Rather than a literal fantasy world, Oz serves as a symbolic destination, a promise of something better that drives the characters forward. Along their journey, echoes of the classic story appear in abstract ways. Though obscure, it's a thoughtful and meditative take on Baum's universe, showing that the journey to Oz can endure in any world, even one stripped of color, comfort, and certainty.
The witch did it?
Guardianes de Oz, 2015. The following year we got one of the most original Oz projects with this Mexican animated adventure that features an original story and new characters, offering a fresh, family-friendly twist on Baum's world by shifting the focus away from Dorothy and onto one of Oz's most unlikely heroes. Set after the defeat of the Wicked Witch of the West, the story begins when Ozzy, a young winged monkey, accidentally releases her from captivity. Wrecked with guilt, he joins forces with a group of quirky allies, including the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, to stop her before she takes revenge on the land of Oz. Visually bright and colorful, Guardianes de Oz leans into high-energy action and broad humor, more in the spirit of a modern animated adventure than a traditional fairy tale. While it didn't receive major international attention, it stands out for its originality. It's one of the few films to explore Oz from the perspective of its magical inhabitants.
Fueron nombrados Guardianes de Oz.
Lost in Oz, 2015 to 2018. After The Wiz Live, another adaptation of The Wiz featuring a modern African-American cast. That same year, we got this modern animated reimagining. In this version of Oz, magic is treated like a scarce natural resource. Dorothy, joined by new friends like Ojo the Munchkin and West the Streetwise Witch, must navigate the dazzling but unstable world to save Emerald City from the Gnome Kingdom and find her way home while uncovering her family's hidden connection to Oz itself. With sleek animation, energetic storytelling, and clever world-building, Lost in Oz reimagines the familiar journey as a high-stakes coming-of-age adventure. Critically praised for its writing and design, the series won several Daytime Emmy Awards and stood out as one of the smartest, most imaginative modern takes on Oz.
Wonderful to see you again!
Again?
Emerald City, 2017. After Tom and Jerry back to Oz, having the duo return to Oz to help Dorothy and her friends again, 2 years later we got this dark reimagining of the original story, transforming the familiar fairy tale into a sweeping adult fantasy drama. This version follows Dorothy Gale, played by Adria Arjona, a nurse from Kansas who's pulled into the mystical land of Oz by a tornado, only to find herself in a brutal world divided by power and prophecy. Oz here is a land of war, politics, and forbidden magic, ruled by the enigmatic wizard who has outlawed sorcery in the name of progress. Along her journey, Dorothy encounters twisted versions of the familiar, witches as warring factions, the Scarecrow as a soldier with no memory, and the Yellow Brick Road as a bloodstained path through conflict. Visually, Emerald City is stunning, yet beneath its spectacle lies a story about control, identity, and belief, themes that feel far removed from the cheerful optimism of Baum's books. Despite its ambition, the series struggled to find its audience and was cancelled after one season. But Emerald City remains a fascinating experiment, a version of Oz where fantasy meets political allegory and where the magic we once knew is reimagined as something dangerous, seductive, and deeply human.
Call your men off and tell them to surrender.
The Steam Engines of Oz, 2018. After Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, another kids-focused adaptation of the first book, the next year we again got one of the more original uses of the Land of Oz, with this steampunk reimagining that turns the Emerald City into an industrial empire powered by gears, steam, and lost ideals. The film offers a gritty yet hopeful vision of Oz long after Dorothy's time, where technology has replaced magic and progress has come at a cost. The film centers on Victoria Wright, a protagonist we haven't seen before, who is a young mechanic who discovers the Emerald City is now ruled by a once-revered Tin Man turned tyrant, and that Oz's steam-driven expansion threatens the balance of the land. Victoria is swept into a quest with a ragged band of allies to find what can restore Oz's heart. Visually, the film leans into steampunk aesthetics, airships, brass machinery, and clockwork cities, giving Oz a new mechanical pulse. While pretty badly reviewed, it reimagines a world we thought we knew, asking what happens when the dream of Oz hardens into machinery.
I am a good worker, keeping the water running, the steam flowing, the clocks ticking.
Wicked 2024. After Dorothy and Total Storytime, another children-focused adaptation, as well as Dee and Friends in Oz, a more diverse adaptation following an African-American girl in Oz, 6 years later we get to the biggest project since Oz the Great and Powerful, or even the 1939 classic, with this long-awaited cinematic adaptation of the Broadway musical, directed by John M. Chu, set years before The Wizard of Oz. The film begins at Shears University where elphaba, played by Cynthia Erivo, born with green skin and a fierce sense of justice, meets Glinda, played by Ariana Grande, a privileged, popular young woman obsessed with status. What begins as rivalry evolves into deep friendship as they uncover the lies and power games behind Oz's facade, especially surrounding the manipulative wizard, when elphaba refuses to stay silent about the injustices she sees. Her path diverges dramatically from Glinda's, ultimately turning her into the Wicked Witch of the West. Chu brings a signature visual flair and musical showmanship, blending theatrical spectacle with cinematic skill. The film features sweeping production design, rich color palettes, powerful vocals, and new arrangements of iconic songs like Defying Gravity and Popular. More than a prequel, this is a reinvention of the Oz myth. On the commercial front, Wicked broke records, marking the biggest opening ever for a Broadway-to-film adaptation and ultimately grossing over $756 million worldwide. Wicked proves that the world of Oz still has power to surprise and uplift. It celebrates the myth while boldly rewriting it, showing that the real magic may lie in rewriting our own stories.
You're green.
The Wizard of the Emerald City 2025. The next year we got this sweeping Russian-produced fantasy reimagining of the Oz mythology. The film introduces Allie Smith, who along with her dog Totoshka is swept into a magical land after a horrific hurricane created by the witch King Gamma. In this version, the journey follows familiar beats, meeting a scarecrow, a tin woodman, crafted by technology, and a cowardly lion as Allie travels the yellow brick road towards the Emerald City in hopes of seeing the wizard and fulfilling her deepest wishes. The visuals aim for a large-scale cinematic feel by a Russian studio. Critically, the film currently holds a mixed reception. Viewers praise its ambition and production value but expressed concerns about the story ending on a major cliffhanger and felt the script was underdeveloped. On the commercial side, the film performed very well for a regional fantasy. It made around $42 million worldwide, nearly all from Russian markets. In the broader landscape of Oz adaptations, The Wizard of the Emerald City stands out for being one of the few non-Hollywood, non-English vernacular takes, especially of a large scale. It again reminds us that the Yellow Brick Road isn't only paved in Kansas or Hollywood. Wicked for Good 2025. After The Wizard of Oz at Sphere, the immersive 4-day version of the 1939 film created specifically to be screened at the Sphere in Las Vegas Valley on the venue's 160,000 square foot video screen at 16K resolution, we get to the latest project to date with the eagerly anticipated continuation and conclusion of the Oz reimagining begun in Wicked. In this sequel, elphaba, the now Wicked Witch of the West, is living in exile, fighting for the silenced animals of Oz and trying to expose the corruption of the wizard, while Glinda has become Oz's glamorous symbol of good under the manipulative guidance of Madame Morrible. Their friendship now strained beyond repair, the film sets them on a path where they must finally face each other, make peace with the consequences of their past, and determine whether the destiny of Oz itself can be changed for good. In the long arc of Oz adaptations spanning over a century, Wicked for Good stands as a prime example of the myth's ability to be reinvented, not simply retold but reframed through ambition, identity, and the idea that even in the land of witches and wizards, friendship can be the most powerful magic of all.
Think of what we could do together.
And there you have it, the full history of Wicked and Oz in movies and TV. From the original classic to the many original and unoriginal adaptations. Now let me ask you, are you excited for Wicked for Good? And what is your favorite Oz project? Let me know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. I have been Dean, the average movie guy on your screen. Big thanks for watching. See you next time. Roll the credits.